Welcome to DNF. I'm Jessica Smetana. That is Spencer Hall. And our guest co-host this week, Mike Golic Jr. It is 4th of July weekend, and the Brits, they win this round because that was a very exciting race at Silverstone. So thank you, Mike, for joining us. Spencer, where do we begin? Do we start with the insane crash on turn one before the race even really started? Do we start with the finish, which was crazy, just a crazy race? Do we start with Ferrari doing Ferrari things again? Where do we begin with this one?
I think this race is so chock full of lunacy that we can start pretty much anywhere. The first thing to start, there's two things actually. So one, Carlos Sainz, smooth operator himself, never in the one spot when the race stopped, always victim of like some weird twerk of circumstance. And yes, I just used twerk, or I should have used quirk, but we're gonna ride with it, okay?
Yeah.
Just like Red Bull told Max Verstappen to ride with a damaged car for like half of this race. Finally wins a race, finally gets to taste the champagne from the top spot. And the second thing is, Zhou Guanyu had the most violent F1 wreck that we've seen in quite a while, ended up skidding on his roof for the better part of like 400 yards and landed not just into the barrier, but flipped over the barrier and landed between the fence, the barrier, and the crowd. That was on lap one, by the way, if you want to know how much force these dudes get coming off of a start. He's all right. That's the one thing we should say. We're all thrilled that he's okay. Shouts out to the Halo for, again, saving someone's ass just like it did in the F2 race earlier. Just an amazing innovation that has undoubtedly saved lives. Also, by the way, narrow up that gap between the tires and the fence, because getting stuck there seems like it sucks.
Or make it wider. I'm not even really sure.
Go either way.
One or the other.
Make a call.
So, Mike, this is your first time joining us. You picked a great race to. First, I guess we should start. Do you watch every Formula One race, or is this like the first time you're watching a full race because you know you have to talk about it now?
No, I've watched most of them, and I've cherry-picked on some of the bigger ones. Like, obviously, I was with most U.S. fans who came in for Miami. Obviously, Monaco's always the big sellout there. But I remember I'd had a lot of these conversations, and we had talked to Spencer and you, quite honestly, on my podcast about this. And I always asked Spencer, especially, what makes a really good F1 track? What makes a great raceway? And boy, oh boy, it all seemed to come on display in this one. So like you guys both said, pick the one that had all of the certain like elements storyline wise with the crash, with the car at the finish to, slow everything down. But I think overall, like, I finally looked, and I still probably couldn't, because I'm an American like idiot pig, pinpoint what exactly about the track made it so conducive to really compelling racing. But start to finish, there was never really a lull in the action, and that was awesome.
Well, this is a real F1 circuit. This isn't like, we're not racing in some like old ancient cities, narrow ass streets, right? So I think
I will not take this Baku slander.
I mean, it was more Monaco slander, really.
Someone has to stand up for the Azeri racing community, and I will do that. It is also, by the way, not a contrived track that is in the middle of the Miami Dolphins parking lot. That is also
under the Florida Turnpike. I agree. I think that's a pro. That's a pro for Silverstone.
Yeah, Silverstone has named corners. That's when you know you're in a real place, when they say, Beckett's. You're like, yeah, that's
and they're the most British sounding words ever, like Cops Corner and the Wellington Straight. Like the Wellington Straight sounds like a piece of water, a waterway that was named in like the 1700s by some imperialist explorer, right?
It does remind me a lot of that video that was going around a bunch of social platforms of the foreign exchange students slandering Americans for not having any culture in his speech. It's like, you think you have culture, we actually do. Having every portion of the named raceway named seems like an indication of that.
It's a race so British, it should be announced by a badger in a necktie, right? Like a charming anthropomorphic badger and his friend, the frog. They should be the toad should be announcing the race.
And he has a monocle also.
Yes, and some really inappropriate opinions about race, class, and gender. Yes, because he'd have to be a British aristocrat. I wanted to point out also, before we even got started in all of this, right, there was the most American style slamming anthem I have seen at a NASCAR
Yes,
event.
it was so good.
I don't even know who that was. He kind of looked like a Nashville session player. He kind of looked like he might also be from Detroit. This dude with flowing barbarian blonde hair and a beard, absolutely belting out God Save the Queen with a ripping guitar solo along with it. Definitely the like Alabama to England pipeline working
Yes.
here if you're keeping score at home.
100%. That guy could easily play the American anthem at Talladega next year and no one would bat an eye.
I did appreciate how much he seemed to catch everyone off guard once he actually started God Save the Queen in the beginning after just melting our faces off. We need more. I feel like every time we involve an instrument in anyone's national anthem, everything is upgraded. Like, I don't understand why we're just letting singers go out here and belt anymore.
Yes,
we have seen that the model works better
so
when you involve something else. Let's not ignore the results that we've got.
Spencer, do you remember last year at one of the Hungarian or Austrian races, they had like a full electric guitar like section playing the anthem? I don't know, but I like that had rave reviews last year, and I wonder if people are now picking up on it. Like, oh, Jimi Hendrix was really onto something. Why haven't we done more of that before our races?
There was so much to get to in this race, but narratively, we'll start with yes, banging guitar solo, yes. Damian Lewis in the pits because Bobby Axelrod was undoubtedly finding a way to fix this race and or support his driver. 3, enormous honking crash, the one that we've mentioned that put Zhou Guanyu nearly into the crowd were it not for a fence on his roof, but also managed to take out a couple of other drivers at the same time. That was where I believe we also lost, was it Alex Albon or it was Pierre Gasly and George Russell. George Russell, the best lad, by the way, keeping up best lad form, though he did crash out. He did vault out of his car to immediately go check on Zhou Guanyu. A lot of people didn't see any of this because F1 sort of standing policy is they won't show the crash. We were talking about this in pre-show. Golic, if this were the NFL, we would have seen the crash 9 times before we even found out if the driver was okay, correct?
Yeah, this is, to me, like one of the biggest differences in just how this was handled, because you're right. Even when they're bringing out the neck board in professional football, we have to go back and make sure the guy who just snapped his tibia also, did he get both feet down? Is the touchdown going to stand? All that happens where you could tell everyone was a little confused, even in the booth, because there are only so much we can comment on before we get to see this, and everyone seems to keep that top of mind. So it was amazing. I think we all, as American fans, have gotten used to judging broadcast booths for how they handle this, and aces across the board here. F1 doing this the quote-unquote right way, which there actually, I believe, is in this kind of setting.
Yeah, I mean, it was almost scarier because we couldn't see what happened as spectators until almost a full 15-ish minutes later, right? And there were very few reports from spectators or from media who were present about what really happened, because it happened so fast and there was no replay for a minute until the onboard camera feed started getting tweeted out. And then we finally got word, thank goodness, that Zhou Guanyu's okay and that he was going to the hospital for just some tests, which apparently have all come back clear. And there was video of him in the paddock after the race where he was up, standing, talking, seemed fine. The team said that he's okay. So that was great to hear. Alex Albon also was in a similar incident, or a similar timed incident right off the starting grid. And he had to go to the hospital for tests also. So waiting to see if he's okay. Apparently we're all precautionary, which is also good to hear. So yes, we didn't see what happened for full 15 minutes. All we saw as fans was George Russell get out of his car and sprint over. And then they did, the announcers kind of kept us as informed as we could be, or as informed as they could, tell us without saying something that maybe they didn't know to be true or not. And so it was really nerve-wracking. I don't know about you guys, but I wasn't really a fan of F1 yet in 2020 when Roman Grosjean crashed into the barricade, which I think was probably one of the last really, really big Formula One scary crashes. I don't know, Spencer, if that's accurate. You've been a fan longer than me. But so for me, this was like immediately just terrifying. Like I didn't know, what to do as a fan just watching it.
Well, it is a reminder that this is a sport where something can go very wrong very quickly, even with all of the precautions and advances that they've had. It may seem weird to not give that kind of injury update. Consider what it was before. If you're not familiar with F1's grisly history, go watch either a documentary called F1 or Grand Prix The Killer Years, which is astonishing in its gore, and that is the right word. Or you could even just watch Senna, which is, for F1 heads, it's just standard, everybody's seen it. But if you haven't seen it, you can go see what happened even when they had sort of had a come to Jesus moment when it came to safety. So it's weird for, I think, somebody who hasn't watched the sport, for them to not get that kind of information. But if you know F1's history and its sometimes callous attitude toward driver safety in the past, this is all because of that, right? This is the end result of like 70 years of movement towards actually valuing a driver's life, which, yes, was an issue at one point.
And taking care of like the people that are watching. Like I always think even over here in, a broadcast booth for like college football where you're told to speculate on this less. In a lot of instances I go back to because families are usually watching. And the last thing I want to do is be speculating about that or giving out sort of half-baked information when they're likely waiting to hear from the team sources, wait to hear from someone much closer to the situation who can deal with that. Like you sort of work, from the very core out with a lot of these things to make sure that that's communicated. Again, like I know we always joke about like the right way, but with this, like this is one of those spots where I think there absolutely needs to be a way that this is communicated that prioritizes a lot of those people inside first for that reason.
In case the race wasn't weird enough already, lap one had protesters on the track.
Yeah,
protesters on the track.
Spencer, what were they protesting? We still don't know, right?
What they were protesting, I'm not sure of. Their methods. I think the crash actually might have ended up saving someone, or at least saving us all a very scary moment, because yes, they charged the fence, but there were no cars actively going, except I believe at the time Esteban Ocon, who was was doing laps with a completely busted up car, just still going for some reason. So yeah, we had protesters, we had a gigantic crash on the first lap. Then we actually got down to racing and thought, well, okay, everything settled down. No, there would be none of that. Max Verstappen, his car, in his words, 100% broken when he ran it, which is, I love that he felt the confidence to go, 85%, no, 100% broken.
100% broken. But then they were like, your car's actually fine. You're just not going to be as fast. So keep driving.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's not a safety issue, but you're going 10 miles an hour slower than everyone else and still out there.
Well,
yeah.
and I wanted to ask you guys this off the beginning because we did have the race essentially restart after the long delay with the crash, and off the initial go of the race, Verstappen took over Carlos Sainz, who started in pole position, and when they restarted that, they went back to the original order. So is this something that pops up a fair amount? Was this something that'll be seen as at all controversial, or is this just the order of business?
I mean, I think the reasoning given being that not every driver was able to finish kind of get out of the accident zone, so they couldn't establish the rest of the rest of the order by the time the safety car came out, was, I think, valid reasoning. I didn't see a ton of, I mean, usually when something like that happens and it seems unfair, Christian Horner will let you know. I didn't even see him arguing about it, Spencer. I don't know about you. Yeah. So to me, I mean, I thought that it seemed fair.
It is one of those times when, for once, race control makes sense. And it doesn't seem like they're entirely making something up. And to be fair, I think if you're running a race that's happening in real time, you're always making a little something up when it comes to untangling a sit. Because look at lap one and look at what happened and then say, make sense of that. There's always going to be something that's just like a little off or a little weird or improvised and all of that. So I don't think, like, in a race that had a bunch of controversies, and that includes, by the way, several overtakes, a lot of close work where I'm kind of astonished we didn't have another wreck due to how close the racing was at points, especially in the 40s. Like when you get to like lap 42, 43, when you have 3, sometimes 4 drivers bunched up at the 2 spot, all taking turns, passing each other, very tight, very close racing. It's astonishing how good they are, that they manage to stay out of each other's wheel wells and off the spoilers. Because I think if the racers were like, 0.0001% less talented, we would have had another 2 people off the track and into the fence. Easy.
Yeah. And the restart didn't only hurt Verstappen, it also hurt Lewis Hamilton, who had a really great start and ended up in P3, I think, right, Spencer, right off the first turn. So then he ended up having not as great of a start on the first restart, so the second standing start. So that was a bummer for him. But you know what wasn't a bummer? He still got on the podium at the end of the day. So let's talk about Lewis Hamilton and his victory in his home race.
Yeah, and whether his victory in third, but victory. Okay?
I think that counts as a victory considering how things have been going for Mercedes this year.
We're grading on the Mercedes curve now. Like a year ago, this would have been preposterous that we're saying this now. We're like, oh, Mercedes got third. What an achievement. I'm not saying you're wrong. I just want to go ahead and contrast the moment that we have evolved into here.
Okay, 2 weeks ago, Lewis Hamilton was saying that this car was shit, though. And now we've had back-to-back weekends on the podium, Spencer. So I think that things are really looking up.
Has anyone in the history of sports had as much practice spraying champagne as Lewis Hamilton? He has to be the best person in the world at it at this point in terms of spraying a magnum of champagne.
Yeah.
Yeah, because no one's had more practice.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you can't even loop Tom Brady into this conversation like you normally would, just because theirs is a once a year champagne fiasco as opposed to this. So yeah, you're absolutely right. Someone tweeted it during this. Lewis Hamilton is going to be up there for one of the coolest lives ever lived when it's all said and done through totality. And like you said, the fact that now we are grading this the way we are and talking about his tenure and his season the way that we are is indicative of just how far the fall kind of is felt.
It's that far. But consider also, you said one of the coolest careers ever. For like the better part of 10 years, it was, well, how does your week go? You go, well, I show up on Sundays. I drive a really fast car in a cool suit, and I get paid like millions and millions of dollars to do it. And then in the end, they hand me an enormous bottle of champagne, and I get to spray it all over total strangers. That there is no other job description that even comes close to being that cool.
Well,
this does get me though.
I wonder if we're about to say the same thing.
Yeah, go ahead.
Is Tom Cruise a good luck charm? Because he was at the race in Silverstone last year, also that Lewis won. Also very controversial.
I just want to know the conversation between Toto and Tom. That's got to be the wildest, least sensical conversation, right? Like, yeah, baby. Yeah, baby. The Toto's like, fucking hey, baby. Yeah. Like, yeah, it's just got to be like affirmations. Just like affirmations of each other's handsomeness and charm. That's it.
Yeah, probably.
We will never die. That's what they're like, yes, we'll never age. We'll never die. You and I, we live forever. Tom Cruise is like, yeah, right. Neither of us will ever die. This does get to my point. Ferrari, in the middle of this race, had a chance to absolutely screw it up. Meaning, I've just repeated myself. It's redundant. Ferrari is Ferrari. At one point, when Sainz has pace on Leclaire, and they've been going back and forth the whole race. If you want to know the plot of the race for Ferrari, it's this: waiting for a mistake from pit strategy, and the two drivers actively lobbying for, well, you see, I'm a little bit faster than that guy. You should let me pass. No. I'm a little bit faster. And this inevitably happens when you talk about F1 teams and teammates, because teams is a real loose term. It's a corporate term for producing two race cars that are driven by two racers who sometimes decide to work together. Sometimes. And at one point, Jess, what did Ferrari tell the drivers when they said, well, we want to go? No, we want to go. What did they tell them?
Go have fun. You guys, you boys, just go have fun. It's a nice day. Just go have fun. What's the big deal? Knock yourselves out, kids.
Go outside. Go outside.
Go play outside with your little brother. Be nice.
It was full-blown Godzilla let them fight meme. It was right on time.
It was take two tiny Spaniards and go let them fight. That's what they were told to do. I'm sorry, a Monegasque.
Monegasque, yeah. I mean,
he's Monegasque.
Very correction.
Yes, two handsome small brunette men just said, go play outside and fight it out. And lo and behold, when they were allowed to pass, Carlos Sainz decided to thrive anyway, and just went and did it. He cooperated once, and then just went and did it. Just, hey, It's my day. It's Carlos' day.
I feel like this is another instance of Carlos Sainz. This kind of happened similarly at Monaco. Like Carlos Sainz kind of knows the strategy better than I think the team directors that are telling him what to do. And like in Monaco and in this race, he could have won Monaco had it not been for other Ferrari foibles, but he's had the winning strategy and he's been fast. And in this race, I just have to give him credit because he was clearly the best driver this weekend, had the best car. And despite all of the craziness, it's so when there's that many safety cars and crashes, for the person who was on pole to win the race, but not look like he was going to win the race the whole time. Like that was amazing to me. So I think credit to him.
I did want though, I wanted at one point in this race for Ferrari to grandiosely screw it up by calling them over for a pit stop where they put the white tablecloth down, where they handed them the menu, where they put the Prix, right, and the bruschetta out, right? Just like, oh, here, no, wait. Leclaire sit there going, what are we doing? And Sainz is like, I could use a little bit. That'd be nice.
Yeah. I'll do the first sample of the wine here. Don't mind me. I'll do the swirl.
Yeah.
I know what this tastes like.
Yeah, it's good. It's fine. Definitely not spoiled. I don't know.
Nope. Wouldn't be able to tell you ever. No, I mean, honestly, I saw at one point, didn't both the AlphaTauris hit into each other and spin out? And I thought, yes, surely this is a sign of the things to come here, that Ferrari is going to one up this for the most brutal cell phone of the race in the way that we've normally become accustomed to. But man, this is kind of, I think, regardless of sport, a reminder that at some point you have to let your teammates be who they are. And if you're caught between worlds, what's the Ron Swanson line? Don't half-ass anything, whole-ass one thing. Like, if they want to go out there and whole-ass fight, don't try and keep them between worlds in some sort of strategy that they're both going to bitch and moan about. Just let them go out there and cut it loose. And lo and behold, your driver actually knows what the hell he's doing, what you're paying him handsomely to do, and ends up finally getting there at the top of the podium.
Yeah,
it's
and
really
they gave him the winning strategy too, which Charles Leclerc didn't have, I guess, the option to go in, and it would have had to be a split-second decision, I think, based on where he was on the track for the last safety car. But they made him go back out there in his old tires, and he wasn't able to keep up with the cars on the newer tires for the last 10 laps. So, I don't know.
Yeah, shouts out to the safety car, by the way. MVP in 2 races this season, at least, in terms of giving us a little bit of drama in one race and a grandiose amount of drama in this one. Also, by the way, rough race for AlphaTauri just in general. But I will say this, at least they finished. At least they finished, all right? Because retirements in this race, to go down the list, okay? We had Zhou Guanyu crashing out, Albon crashing out, George Russell crashing out. My boy, it's such a hard day for my sons. My boy Valtteri Bottas had to retire due to a mechanical issue. Gasly, half of AlphaTauri didn't finish. The other half of AlphaTauri, yes, Yuki Tsunoda spinning out while screaming, which I appreciated, and ending up finished in 14th place. Ocon out. Like a disastrous day where you look at Daniel Ricciardo in 13th and go, good job.
Right.
Good job. You finished, buddy. Good job. Because not everyone did. A definite lottery of a race today in terms of were you even going to make it to the final lap?
Yeah, and his teammate Lando Norris finishing in, I believe, 6th place. Is that right?
Lando was at least had a great seat for the drama. Okay, almost got into it a little bit at the end. Right, was probably thinking the same thing I was thinking, which was maybe 6th is fine today. Let's just steer clear of whatever that is. That may have been the thought in his head. Whereas Lewis Hamilton, to get 3rd at one point, saw 2 drivers, all right, I believe it was Leclerc and Perez fighting, and said, excuse me, whoop. It was the greatest, I don't know if you've ever seen someone avoiding a street fight by just kind of sliding through while somebody's filming. I'm just trying to get to the store. That's what Hamilton's move looked like. It was a stunning move. It was referred to as brave. I know that a British announcer is absolutely jacked about something when they go, a courageous move, because there's only one other place they use the word brave or courageous, and that's when somebody in rugby dives headfirst at someone's kneecap, right? Risking life and limb for one play. They're like, what a courageous move. And I'm like, oh, that means you thought he would die. right? And actually risk the biscuit.
Well, speaking of courageous, Lando and Daniel with the all-time best moment leading up to a race the other day with the, I don't know what they call them in Britain, like the bouncy ball things. Spencer, what were they calling those things? Do you know what they had some like name for those like bouncy yoga balls?
I don't remember what they were calling them, but I assure you, if they were using the British terminology for it, it was ridiculous.
It was. And Daniel bravely throwing his at his teammate's face in front of cameras everywhere. Luckily no one was hurt, but it was probably one of the best pieces of Formula One content that I've seen in all my years.
Again, the podcast empire starts next year for Daniel Ricciardo.
Yes.
The cameo in the NASCAR Truck Series is inevitable. This is already done. He's just one of those guys who, I think, like Lewis, if you saw Lewis on the podium, happily spraying Carlos Sainz and then getting some random buddy of his in the crowd with the champagne, clearly enjoying the moment, even though they know that their time in very different ways, I think, is limited in their particular position in F1. Ricciardo's by simply being in the sport and whatever Hamilton wants to do next year, which we still don't really know.
Well, I also read this week Daniel Ricciardo is EPing a new Hulu series, a scripted series about drivers. So I think you're onto something.
Sure. No. His path into the entertainment industry, it's lit steps, right? Just come on up. Come on the podcast. He will be on DNF. We can make this happen.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
In the Lewis Hamilton realm, are we so I think I heard them mention this at the end of the broadcast. This is looking like it has more and more of a chance to be the first year where he has never outright won a race in his career. Does that feel like a foregone conclusion at this point? Did this do anything in the help or hurt phase of making you believe he might still be able to pull one out at the top of a podium?
I mean, Carlos Sainz won for the first time.
Yeah.
If that happened, then yeah, taking the guy who was the established best driver in the world as of a year ago, that could easily happen. The question is whether it's going to be that continued dominance once Mercedes figures something out over the offseason as he gets another year older, which we talk about another year older in F1 terms. People's reaction times really do matter at the margins. So if he's even an nth of a second closer, the other counter is this. That's usually based on the bulk of F1 careers. He's in better shape and has better support at this point than any driver in F1 history, arguably, and takes care of himself, is very, very, very conscientious about it. So I think it could be entirely possible that you see him back at the top, but maybe once this year, not consistently this year at all, which I think that's been the MO from Mercedes. I'm not, there's been nothing new.
I also think this was his race to win. This was the one. He looked like he could have had it the entire time and then it slipped away. I don't know if the safety car even helped him or hurt him, because in the end, Sergio Perez was able to come back out of nowhere, came from 17th all the way up to finishing in second. But I wouldn't count out Lewis. I mean, especially when you see something like today where the faster cars like the Red Bull could have a puncture and then, he only has to beat out one other Red Bull to win. And he was, faring very well against Perez at the end of the race. So I wouldn't rule anything out.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah. I would also just say this, that really when you get into who's going to win, you can always take a lottery shot on half the crowd or half of the crowd will crash out. That's also hey, we might just have an absolute disaster of a race where it rains and half the crowd crashes out and we get somebody weird like Sebastian Vettel P2. That might happen at one point this season.
I do appreciate that in all of our conversation about everyone who crashed out here. Shout out to Latifi for finally making it through a race. I feel like everyone that I have checked in on, he did manage there. I know he got it started. He was up inside the points at the beginning of this race and managed to actually finish. Even though he dropped back a little bit, I feel like that's of note because he had become the one constant for me in this season. Is anytime I tuned in and watched a race myself, anytime I was watching it through the timeline, I could always count that at some point I was going to see his car lodged into the wall. So that feels noteworthy.
He almost finished with points too. We were so close to
so
Mick
close.
And Latifi in the points.
We were so close, but you know what we did get? Haas gang, stand up. We got double points for Haas. That is right. Gunther Steiner, it is your Independence Day, not America's. Double points for Haas gang. Congratulations. It's a big moment for us all.
They are the American team, technically, right? So
that's right.
I guess I take back what I said at the beginning of the show. America, we win. We had the biggest finish of the day. 2 points, two drivers, in the points for Haas on Independence Day weekend.
Yeah,
Someone top that.
This is it's the most American thing because we sort of like hit the bare minimum of what could be considered excellence. We're like, yeah, baby, spray the champagne. Let's do it.
100%. Well, if you have any questions, please put them in the chat. We will get to some of them. We did have one commenter say that Tom Cruise looks like he's gunning to play Toto in the F1 movie. Maybe that is the scripted series that Daniel Ricciardo will be writing for Hulu. It will be about Toto as portrayed by Tom Cruise. Although I don't think Tom Cruise would ever do TV unless he can do some ridiculous stunt move out of a helicopter. He's not going to do that.
No, that's how Toto in the series comes into every race. He just he does a halo jump out of a helicopter, right? Opens his chute like 50 feet off the ground and then immediately strips into the Mercedes onesie, right? Like, all right, let's go. Yes.
See, everything you just described, by the way, sounds like the natural convergence of events here is when Formula One finally finds a way to negotiate itself into the Fast and Furious franchise in one of these later movies with real drivers and with Tom Cruise starring as Toto Wolff in that. That feels like the logical conclusion.
Do you think Tom Cruise was in the Mercedes garage listening to everyone talk about the halo on the cars and being like, what, where? You guys watching my clip? You guys on YouTube? You guys see that? Halo? Yeah, that's
stunts.
me.
Yeah.
I trained for that.
This is all about Tom Cruise eventually writing a movie where he dies. Whereas part of the commitment to the movie, he absolutely dies saving the world, right? It's like they're reading the script and they're like, Tom, this is great. How are we going to pull off this end? And he's like, I'm going to die. That's how he's going to do it.
But does the world actually get saved? Because
Tom Cruise will also put the world in absolute mortal danger. It's all the commitment to the role and putting on a show for the people. We have another question here. I love it. Has Max Verstappen ever drank a decaf coffee on purpose?
Does decaf coffee exist in Europe?
That's a fair question.
I feel like they're always caffeinated there.
I think it does, but I will also state this for Daniel Eads. It would be more terrifying if he had never touched a cup.
That's a good point.
Seems far more likely. Shout out to everybody at Silverstone for making their feelings on Max Verstappen very well known at every possible juncture. That man is despised and loathed in a way that I really appreciate.
By the way, can we just go ahead and also shout out that crowd for just being rowdy as hell?
Oh my God, yes.
Rowdy ass F1 crowd.
So as soon as there was the stoppage at the beginning of the race for the safety car, and then there was a few minutes where it was very serious. We didn't know what happened. Then we found out what happened. Everyone seemed to be okay. And then all of a sudden Sky was like, there's a lady with 4 beers. There's a guy with ice cream all over his face. There's people raging with Hawaiian lays on. We were just going absolutely nuts in the stands for 10 minutes.
Spencer, you tweeted about it. This race felt as NASCAR as you can get for a Formula One race.
Absolutely. With reason. Again, the Alabama to England pipeline. It's very real. I also looked at that crowd and thought, there's more people in that crowd who are like, I don't need to eat for the next week. It's fine. Put it into F1 tickets. Let's go, lads. Let's go.
This is absolutely the race to go to, right? If you're a first-time F1 fan who can make their way to the UK.
It's real hard not to argue after this race that it is not the spot you should go see a race at.
And it's cheaper than a ticket to the Miami Grand Prix. And you might get fed real food.
And you also won't suffer heat stroke. The points keep adding up for Silverstone, right? You go, ha ha ha, England, rainy and cold, and you're like, England, rainy and cold in July. Got some points. It's got some merit.
I don't know if you guys saw in qualifying yesterday, but Martin Brundle and David Croft seemed so upset that it started raining right before it started. Not because it was going to be a sloppy qualifying session and the quality of the cars would suffer, but because they were like, we swear it's usually sunny here in the summer. like, I know you guys think that this is just a wet gray wasteland, but we swear it's usually better than this. And I was like, but it is a wet gray wasteland. So right now, so I don't know if I trust you guys.
Yeah, if you have any other questions, by the way, go ahead, drop them in the comments. We will answer the good ones and maybe the bad ones too if you have them.
Maybe.
We have a question. Did Mick prove to you he's got that dog in him? That's all caps. After repeatedly going at Max in the last corners and putting his points at risk.
Yes, absolutely. That was riveting stuff. I mean, at that point, we were all checked out of the top three. We kind of had that set in stone. But then, oh my God, I thought Mick was going to knock Verstappen off of the track or vice versa, because that was about as hard of a race we had seen until this point. And that includes the really hard racing we had just seen 5 minutes earlier from the leaders. It was awesome.
It had very much the same energy to me as at the end of a basketball game when one team has pulled their starters early and you get some bench mob guy who comes in and is playing elite level defense with 11 seconds left on the clock, trying to have it be his time. Like, this is the situation where we have a discussion after the game about the right or wrong in going for a layup with 0.4 seconds left after a really ill-advised steal. So I applaud him for the energy. Dog status approved.
Yeah, bombing threes down 16. Yeah, with 15 seconds, absolutely.
Yeah, it did feel like his senior day walk-on moment. He was like, I'm just going for it. This is my chance. And he almost had it too. That was really great to watch. But yeah, like we said, double points for Haas. So shout out to Mick. My fear was that something terrible was going to happen and he wasn't going to end up finishing. Because that's kind of been his luck the last few races, but it was nice to see him in the points, even if he didn't beat Verstappen ultimately.
Will Gunther get another nipple piercing to celebrate Mick's first points?
I really hope that we will find out during the next season of Drive to Survive if there was some sort of Ricardo-esque bet on the line for him getting points in this race. Whether it's a nipple ring or a tattoo, either one, I could absolutely picture Gunther with a full sleeve on both arms to begin with. So yeah, I think that'd be a great outcome.
I just Googled Gunther nipple piercing, and let me tell you what you shouldn't do.
Google
any sort of
that.
device.
Did you use a last name or just Gunther?
Nope, just went with Gunther nipple piercing. Yeah, I honestly, part of me wanted the rush of risking knowing what I could possibly see, and let me tell you what, it delivered in every way you would never hope it would.
I was gonna say paid off. I guarantee you that paid off. Is Martin Brundle the best awkward interviewer in sports? Yes.
Yes.
I will answer for everyone here. The answer is yes. I have never seen anybody who is closer to Alan Partridge territory in real time than Martin Brundle let loose on the grid. It is British office level awkward without the script. It is incredible. He's and hates it. That's the best part. It only gets funnier every week that Martin Brundle actively dislikes this role that they've thrust him in, but they're paying him far too much money for him to say no.
That's fair. I think my favorite part is every week more people who haven't seen it yet watching it and tweeting about, or like today I was watching with a couple of friends who've never watched Formula One before, and they were like, this is so awkward. Why are they doing this? I'm like, no, this is the best part. This is actually the best part of the whole broadcast. This is probably the best part of the sport. So soak it all in.
Martin's become transcendent too. He was my favorite part of the NBA draft when he tweeted congratulations to Paolo Banchero, not Patrick Mahomes. So he's arrived.
Oh, that was great.
Lexicon.
Yes, that was.
I saw that. I was like, all right, you know what? He may hate it, but part of him understands we all have a role to play, and I'm going to make sure that I keep this bit going for as long as possible.
See, we inherited this from England too. We just keep promoting people to their level of like least competence, like when they run out of competence, right? Like everyone thought Wolf Blitzer was like super smart until they put him on Jeopardy, and then Wolf ended up like, negative on the day, and we're like, oh no! Wolf doesn't know what the capital of the United States is. This is bad. Yeah. Does George Russell host High Tea today? And does Lando Norris politely decline? I will say George Russell hosts High Tea every day.
Yeah.
Lando Norris, being English, would not politely decline. He will go and be awkward, right, in order to keep up appearances. I will also state this, that George Russell, if you did not see, I shared this video from someone kicked a soccer ball onto
Oh,
the
that was
margin
so
of the
good.
track.
Yes.
And I think this was probably yesterday at like dusk, because at dusk, typically the teams, they ride the track either on a bike or they run it, right, to sort of stay fit. And he was going around, and these fans were yelling at George Russell to get the ball for them. We're saying, the football, George, get the football. And George Russell comes over like, oh, they're saying hello to me. Hi, I'm just going to wave to the fans. And they're like, get the ball, George. And he's like, just waving at them like, hi. And either he's oblivious to what they're asking for, that this guy's screaming for, or he's playing dumb, and it's the funniest thing I've ever seen, because he's just, he's like so genial looking, right? The best lad. And waving at them. They're like, get the ball.
They're like, no, we need our football. And I was expecting him to throw a great spiral back until I realized that I'm a dumb American and it's a soccer ball.
Oh, man.
That's a DNF policy, standing policy to anyone who is non-American here. We are dumbasses. We are American dumbasses.
Just so stupid. The DNF stands for dumbass, I think. It's fair to say.
They brought me in here this week. Jesus Christ. Should that tell you anything?
We're ready. We're ready, man. This is one I'm going to throw to y'all because I definitely have an answer. I just want to hear yours before. Is Charles Leclerc more happy for Carlos or mad at Ferrari?
He's mad at Ferrari. I think he's like probably not even that happy for Carlos either. Like I mean, he seemed kind of happy for him yesterday that he was on pole, but that's because that doesn't really mean anything. Like Charles still thought he could win this race today. So I don't know. I mean, I know they're kind of like buddies, but I don't think he's very happy. I think he is full send pissed at Ferrari because that championship has completely slipped away. There's a very, very low shot that they're going to be able to fight for that.
Yeah, this goes back to my LeBron James theory about threats. You go back to years before Steph Curry won his first MVP, and LeBron's at the All-Star game with him, gassing him up, talking about, oh, he gave my point guard 3 hezzies. And then years later, when Steph wins back-to-back MVPs, the tone and tenor changed decidedly around that, because to LeBron James, as long as you're not a threat, he is more than willing to publicly gas you up to the public. See Ja Morant in this postseason. Now is the same thing. Like, it's all fun and games until everyone starts messing with your cash. And we are firmly in the messing with your cash portion of the Ferrari life cycle this season.
Yeah, you live in Monaco. That ain't cheap. You mess with my cash. You mess with my cash, it's going to stack up fast. Y'all are right. Because there's absolutely no way that anybody as focused on the task as an F1 driver or as privileged is going to look at another person and go, yeah, I'm not mad about the strategy that potentially negatively impacted my outcome. No! He's furious. Mattia Bonotto was seen on camera telling him, son, remember where your checks come from. Like, that's what he was saying. Like, take a minute. It might have looked real polite, and I'm sure it was, but the message was, pause. Remember who the bank is, okay? That's us. That's us for the moment, and you have a seat with Ferrari. Yes, flaky Ferrari, but still Ferrari.
Yes, and Carlos is signed on with Ferrari till 2024. Charles is signed an extension for a little bit longer till 2026, I believe. So Charles doesn't want to see Carlos become the number one guy, and he's already seen that happen now in a couple races where Carlos has had the better strategy and has pulled off better finishes, despite the fact that Carlos has also had some pretty bad luck this season. So if a few of those things shake out differently, Carlos, could be fighting for that number one spot against Charles. And I don't think Charles wants to see that, because the way the season started, he was very firmly the number one guy and has had some really rough finishes since Monaco, which was, I think, probably the most devastating moment of his season, given that he is from Monaco and it's his home race, and he looked like he had that in the bag, had a pretty solid lead until Ferrari mucked it up for him.
Driver most resembling a Lord of the Rings character.
Oof. Man, your boy Terry Bodass has a real hot shot at this, right? Like, I could absolutely see him with Aragorn and the gang on the human side of things.
Oh,
Yeah, he
wow.
could
I
be.
was going
Yeah.
Hobbit because they're all kind of small, right?
Mm-hmm. You know who actually absolutely resembles a Hobbit is Signs. Like Signs absolutely resembles a Hobbit, right? Like one of the more athletic ones, yes, but a Hobbit nonetheless. If I put elf ears on George Russell,
Yes,
he
I
would
was
fit.
thinking George Russell looks like an elf. 100, yes, 100% on the same page. He's very like tall and slender. He's very
Mm-hmm.
elf-like. I don't know if you saw the way he was like kind of running out of his car earlier. It was very graceful. He definitely gives me elf vibes. But yeah, I think maybe if Carlos had curlier hair, I could see that one. But his hair is way too long, straight, and luscious.
Yeah. Additionally, Christian Horner is also a Hobbit, which will
Yes.
infuriate him because he is short. And he could be
And
like, "I'm actually average for height. I'm average for my height. It's fine."
I could see Toto being a wizard.
Well, and you know what? Like Toto could absolutely fit into the wizard category. I was trying to see if there was anyone else that might qualify for that, but I did want to revisit my position on Terry Bodas. He'd definitely be with the dwarves. Like if we're going to go in the shorter portion of this, he's much, and maybe it's the red hair pushing him to Gimli status, but I think I would definitely try to push him there now.
Gunther is a ring wraith.
Yeah, he is the ring wraith. He's coming for it. He's coming, baby. It'll take him a while. He's behind, but he's catching up with every step. Is there any chance the protesters were representatives of the Pac-12 seeking a media deal with Sky? I don't think the Pac-12 has money for the plane tickets or race tickets at this point. So no.
Actually, I think they might have been representatives from the Big Ten trying to recruit Formula One to join the Big Ten. I mean, you're already going to have teams flying from California to Rikers. Might as well cross another pond and go all the way to the UK.
Collegiate F1 racing. There is actually between engineering schools something equivalent to this, but like full-on collegiate racing. Would love to see, especially if we did NASCAR in the SEC and if we just did F1 sort of as a Big Ten thing. So we can just build that rivalry back up.
So in that spirit, Spencer, if you had to pick of the drivers in the field, which one's Iowa and why?
always punting. That would be Alan. I want to say Alan Prost as a historical answer because he was always Captain Conservative. But then again, Alan Prost actually won things, so he can't be Iowa.
This is a fair point.
I just saw an amazing Lewis Hamilton quote from after the race pop on my Twitter timeline, which is he was asked about his battle with Charles Leclaire, and he said that, "What a great battle. Very sensible driver. Clearly a lot different to what I experienced last year. Cops, for example. The two of us went through no problem." There's a lot of petty in there.
A lot. I think we'll do one more question. Do we have an American equivalent to Martin Brundle? No, I don't think we do. All right. Occasionally you'll get a guy who has a bad moment like that. Like Chris Myers would sometimes do that for Fox. Like he would roll up and ask something like, "So, hey, your mother must be very proud." And they'd be like, "My mom's dead." Like occasionally that happened to Chris Myers. That one actually didn't happen to him. But we don't have, I think the thing that makes Martin Brundle special is that there is a stiff upper lip to it all, a Britishness where he's like, "I'm going to get through this. I'm going to do it," when he has absolutely no chance of being like successful on the level he wants to be on because the situation's impossible, right? Like it's the grid. No one wants to talk to him. Everyone's busy. And this happens every week.
I certainly can't think of an example in American sports. Maybe there's an example in the non-sports world that I am not as familiar with, but Martin Brundle, like you said, brings something very special and very British to these shows that I can't think of a crossover comparison to.
Jess, I think you're right. The only place we'd be able to find it, because they're the only place with a similar style of practice, would be in entertainment. It would have to be like Extra or someplace like that that's used to doing like a lot of red carpets where this also presents similar problems. But the only American thing that we have energy-wise similar to Martin would probably be Super Bowl Media Day. Like when you get that Super Bowl opening night media day where we have people coming in wedding dresses and asking questions and using kids as a meat shield. Like that's the only place that I think even comes close.
What we need is Nardwar. If you're familiar with Nardwar, hip hop interviewer who goes up to people and has done like miles of research. So he's like, so I understand this was your mother's favorite record when you were 7. He's like, how'd you know that? Like, we need him to completely derail the F1 grid. Like, no, I'm not getting in the car until I figure out how you knew that.
Oh.
All right. Well, I think that'll wrap us up for this episode of DNF. Thank you, Mike, for joining. Everyone have a great, safe 4th of July weekend. I am wearing my bathing suit right now, and I am about to go jump in the pool. So thanks for joining in. Spencer, Mike, any last words on the British Grand Prix?
I can only hope to get half as much mayhem in our next race, because that was the best race of the season. And if we top it, you're going to have to peel me off the ceiling.
That kicked full ass. Thanks for having me, guys.
All right. See you after Austria.
All right. Auf Wiedersehen.
Cheerio.